In 1989, Ebola made its way to the U.S. Residents of this Washington, D.C. suburb had no idea that one of the world's deadliest viruses had emerged in their midst. In a primate quarantine unit in Reston, Virginia, monkeys in one of the holding rooms suddenly began to die. Secretly, a military team entered the quarantine unit and killed all 60 monkeys in the infected room. The crisis heightened as monkeys began to die in a different room. It appeared that the virus was moving through the ventilating system. In response, the military killed all 400 monkeys, ending the outbreak. This new strain of Ebola had shown the potential to spread through the air. Had it been lethal in humans, it could have been catastrophic.
Hello guys, let's start from the basics. For a few decades now, it has been known that some strains of Ebola can spread through the air. In a Canadian cross-species study, it was shown that no direct contact between different species was needed for Ebola to spread. Then in the Reston, USA outbreak, it was also shown that Ebola can spread through the air for quite some distances. And the reason that there's now over 60 medical professionals wearing full body protection suits and everything, have died from this outbreak of Ebola, the most likely reason is that they're ignoring the fact that this strain of Ebola can spread through the air, and they're not protecting themselves, fully from that. And if you look at the chart of how quickly the infection is spreading, this is clearly a very virulent strain of Ebola. The most virulent we've ever seen. And it just seems to be getting worse and worse and totally out of control. And it doesn't help that the media keeps on lying that, now all of a sudden they're saying that Ebola doesn't spread through the air, when, before, some years ago, it was common knowledge. It was, they admitted it fully that Ebola spreads through the air, or there are some strains at least of Ebola can spread through the air. And it doesn't help that now we've reached the point we can't trust, the media fully. That it's when there's the case in Britain that a woman was throwing up in the airplane and everything and died coming from a trip from Western Africa, that the media just says that okay, no Ebola, trust us. And because the media lies so much, we really can't trust it. We really can't trust the media anymore.
Ebola is a virus that can be stopped. It can be stopped in the community by control measures, and it can be prevented from spread in hospitals by meticulous infection control. That means you really have to follow every one of the procedures carefully. Doctors Without Borders, MSF, has been caring for Ebola patients for many years in outbreaks. They've never had a death in one of their workers. So and that's in work in Africa without the kind of advanced infection control.
How can you tell people to be 100% confident that someone else won't die or get sick as a result of this decision?
Ebola does not spread by casual contact.
If Ebola doesn't spread through casual contact, then why is it spreading so fast? Why is it that medical professionals in full body suits are getting sick? They're getting sick because this strain of Ebola spreads through the air as well. And the medical professionals are just keeping, this, that, no, don't be afraid of the air spread. And that's the reason they're getting sick themselves.
people who are looking at the events of the last couple of days, who are concerned even of the Centers for Disease Control's mishandling of biochemicals and other agents and diseases at your own labs, have to be wondering about the ability of our healthcare system, of the U.S. government, to be able to prevent a spread here, particularly with those affected workers, 2 in total, who will be back in the United States. What can you say to deal with that concern?
I certainly understand that concern. At CDC, we had lapses in our laboratories. Fortunately, no one was hurt and nothing was released into the laboratory or environment. However, we're out of the laboratory and into the environment. But what is so important is if there are patients with possible Ebola or confirmed Ebola in hospitals, that doctors and the entire healthcare team are super careful.
The doctors are being super careful, but this disease is still spreading. The doctors themselves are catching the disease. This strain of Ebola is airborne. Face the facts. And it doesn't help that, the politicians are doing everything they can to spread it, to spread the disease, to spread this strain of Ebola. Accepting it, patients diagnosed with this disease into our nations. This is absolutely insane. They're spreading it on purpose. And they don't quarantine people coming from these nations into our nations. They're just letting them come without a quarantine. There should be a 21-day or a little bit higher, just to be sure, quarantine for anyone coming from those infected nations. So we will stop the spread. We have to quarantine the spread of this virus before it gets totally out of control. Once it's here, it will start spreading just as rapidly that it is spreading in Western Africa.
Now reaching out to the federal Homeland Security Director for answers she says the president isn't giving.
And to Texas now, where we're learning exclusively about a new health threat coming from illegal border crossers. The Border Patrol now worried about a virus outbreak.
They're seeing crossers with contagious infections, and sources tell me right now, all that's separating the sick from the healthy, this caution tape, and agents tell me that's not enough.
We're sending people everywhere, and the average person, the average citizen doesn't realize what's going on down here.
A lot of people are very frustrated, especially people who are working inside the camps. Of course, they tell me that the government says if you speak out, if you tell people what's really happening here, you're not only going to be fired, but we're going to throw you in jail too. So there's a significant threat there, and people are really wondering, well, wait a second, they're not letting congressmen in. They're telling people you're going to be fired if you speak out, and now they're not even letting pastors in, and folks are wondering what the heck is going on in those government-controlled camps that they don't want us to know about.
Department of Homeland Security is essentially putting up another giant detention center. They're calling it an immigration holding cell, and they're expected to hold up to 1,000 kids 72-hour increments at a time and release them by bus into different parts of the country unknown. And behind me too, if you see, there's a brown bus. It is a giant FEMA bus. What's happening to our country right now is mind-blowing. In McAllen, Texas.
And caution in Washington, where participants arriving from the affected countries for the U.S.-Africa summit will be screened. Authorities on alert should another case of Ebola turn up unexpectedly.
Now, back to Obama's magic pen. He signed another executive order today, and this one is going to allow for the detention of Americans with respiratory illnesses. Now, of course, this is all coming on the wake of that Ebola scare. Well, Obama's amendment will allow for the detention of Americans who just display acute respiratory syndromes. The Centers for Disease Control already has measures in place for dealing with an outbreak of a communicable disease. It'll allow for the quarantine of well persons who do not show symptoms of the disease. So obviously, they are already prepping themselves to have the authority to quarantine Americans.
This is just classic problem, reaction, solution. The politicians, on purpose, let the disease, the epidemic spread, create the problem, create the pandemic in our nations, and then they offer their solution. And their solution, of course, is to detain us. And of course, while doing that, they will detain political opponents. And then they may force vaccinate. And who knows what kind of shit will be in their vaccines. Maybe they will spread the disease itself in the vaccines. Who knows? All I know that it's simply insane to keep our borders open. Why allow people coming from those nations to enter our nations? Why not quarantine? Why let the disease spread? Why spread the disease on purpose? So they can get just more power? Or is it to kill us? Why are they doing this? Why? And why does the media keep on lying? You know, let's face it, there is no legitimate government anymore in Western nations. They're all the problem. You are the government now. They are all illegitimate. You are the government. Don't wait for, the government to come and save you. The government won't come, and if they come, they'll just make it worse. The politicians caused this problem, this epidemic, spread it to our nations on purpose. They have lost all credibility, they have lost all legitimacy. You are the government now. Organize on a local level and fix the problem. And if at all possible, close the borders. Oh, and I don't want to end this video on a negative note. I'll offer a glimmer of hope. A possible solution to this Ebola epidemic. When there was an Ebola epidemic in Zaire, the doctors invented a way to cure it by taking the blood from those people whose bodies had already defeated Ebola, and then screening the blood that there's no diseases in that blood. And then, injecting it into a person of the same blood type, with their permission. And it worked. Out of the 9 people who that treatment was given, 8 survived from Ebola. And that's just, with Ebola, that's unbelievably good survival rate. So that could be a possible solution to this. Also, there is a possibility that the bats in the region who are immune to Ebola, that I don't know what would happen if you took the white blood cells from those bats in laboratory conditions and then injected it into Ebola-infected human blood. Would the white blood cells, who are very efficient to kill off Ebola, would they kill off Ebola? Would they harm the human blood, human cells? If they just kill the Ebola and leave the human cells alone, or if it could be somehow made to leave it alone, maybe that could be a solution. I don't know. But yeah, I'll leave this video on a positive note. See you guys in another video. Bye bye. Hello guys, one last thing. While searching to confirm my bat hypothesis, I found out that they are actually trying to cure Ebola by injecting Ebola into mice and then taking the white cells from the mice and injecting them into other animals, Ebola-infected animals, to see will it cure Ebola. And why I think my bat hypothesis, my bat solution could be better is that you don't actually have to inject any Ebola into the bat, because the bats in the region, they already are accustomed to Ebola. Their immune system is already immune to Ebola. The white blood cells already attack it and effectively kill off Ebola, making them immune. So you don't have to inject any bats with Ebola and then inject that into a human. You just take the white blood cells from a bat and inject it in a laboratory condition into a sample of human blood what has Ebola, and see what happens. If the white blood cells kill off the Ebola and leave the human cells alone, then my solution is perfect. And because bats live in, very, very tight-knit communities, if you find one bat, who already has this natural immunity to Ebola, they already have gone through the disease, long time ago, and they're immune. You can, just make sure that the bat's blood is totally safe. There's no diseases in it, and then use that. And you don't have to inject anyone with Ebola. You don't risk spreading disease. It's just, white blood cells what you inject, and that's it. So there's no risk of spreading Ebola like there is in their, injecting mice with Ebola solution. Just fun I'll add this one. But okay, I'll now show the clip of the Zaire doctors. Brilliant, brilliant doctors. Bye-bye.
That night, Dr. Masamba, head of the Zairean team, defends the transfusion at a hastily convened international meeting.
We felt compelled to try something new. There is no treatment. Tell us if there's something else we can do and we'll do it. But we all know there's nothing. That's why we did the transfusion. We asked our nurse if she wanted us to do the procedure, and she consented in writing. As for transfusing whole blood, we simply don't have the means here to sterilize human plasma. We felt compelled to try something. Now we'll just wait and see what happens.
Everyone waits to see whether Nicole will pull through. The tension is palpable. Four days after the transfusion, there seems to be improvement.
I'm eating now. I go out, I wash myself, and I can get up without any help.
Our nurse is doing better. I'm really relieved. I think that after Nicole, other people who get sick may want us to try this same treatment. And personally, I think it will work.
A week later, Nicole is weak, but almost fully recovered. Encouraged by their success, the Zairean doctors transfuse 8 more patients. 7 survive. The Western doctors remain unconvinced.
It would not be my choice to have given these blood transfusions. On the other hand, with the pressure to do something, I can absolutely understand why these experiments were done. I think what's unfortunate from my point of view is that we'll never know whether this worked or not.
There's other possible explanations that late in the epidemic the virus may be less virulent after several passages through human hosts. There's a possibility that late in the epidemic people were having less exposure, that there was some awareness, so people were being more careful, so they were getting smaller viral loads when they were getting infected. So the ideal thing would have been to have one group get the transfusions and have one group not get them or get a placebo transfusion. Unfortunately, it's not something we can study in humans. You certainly aren't going to give someone Ebola to do a trial like that. We have to wait for an epidemic situation to do that.
The transfused patients are the last in the ward. No more cases appear. The epidemic is over.